Hi, I'm Dr. Eric ClaVille, and thank you for joining us for this segment of the ClaVille Report. In this segment, we'll discuss Justice McConnell, the lasting impact. The last several years during the past Trump administration, Mitch McConnell took it upon himself to reshape the federal courts in the United States. In his words, the federal bench, this is my top priority. Now, you ask yourself, why are the courts so important? Well, in my belief and opinion, I believe that the judicial branch of our government is the most important branch of our government because it has the ultimate power of checks and balances. I've discussed this before in a previous segment where we looked at an overview and the impact of the U.S. judiciary. Mitch McConnell himself just did not start to think about stacking and changing the court. But this was a process that we'll find out in this segment that started years ago, ensuring that for generations to come in the United States, the federal bench would be more conservative and include more justices that are what we call strict constructionists. The importance of the federal bench shows that, one, it can invalidate any statute, any regulation, any policy on the federal level. Also, the justices that serve have lifetime appointments. Many times, we look at the federal court as being the U.S. Supreme Court, but we find that there are almost 100 district federal courts, and of course, 11 circuits, and of course, the 12th Circuit being the D.C. Circuit, and then also the Special Court Circuit, which gives us 13 federal circuits. Most cases don't make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. So ensuring that the lower courts have justices appointed to the seats that are in their 40s, in their early 50s, will ensure that their decisions that are made impact our country for a minimum of 25 years, even 40 or longer. That's what I call generational change. But this is just not a one-off. This is a trend that we'll see that the Conservative Party and others that concentrate on the courts will continue all through the years, unless it is challenged. But before I go any further, I want us to take a look at this Vox Media clip, which shows us exactly how the court was made under Mitch McConnell during the Trump administration. Let's take a moment. Let's take a look at this. Since 2018, he stated that we're creating a generational change on the federal judiciary, reshaping the federal judiciary. Many people may wonder, why did Mitch McConnell put up with the insults of former President Donald Trump? Why did he put up with the chaos that was created? This was the reason why, to reshape the courts, the federal courts in the United States. Elections have consequences, and the power of the Senate was on full display with Mitch McConnell and these courts. If you are a student of politics, a student of policy, a student of the process, you have to look at this and honor how masterful the plan was. But at the same time, if you're a student of politics, process, and policy, you have to also say to yourself how unfair a lot of these processes were. But elections have consequences. When you're in power, you take the stand and take the opportunity to wield it as you will. And what Mitch McConnell did, he wielded his power to reshape the federal judiciary. As a matter of fact, it pointed out, it was highlighted that Merrick Garland, the U.S. Supreme Court nominee by President Obama, which I believe he should have nominated a Black female, African-American female. I think it would have had less of a pushback and could have really held the Mitch McConnell Senate feet to the fire to appoint that justice to the U.S. Supreme Court or to hold a hearing for it. But neither here nor there, Merrick Garland was not even given a hearing. They wouldn't take meetings with him. That's tradition. But he went against tradition. He went against it. He went against it for a reason. He went against it to reshape the federal judiciary. In politics, you've heard the saying, all's fair in love, war, and politics. Well, you may not like it, but it happened. And we see by the outline from the Vox Media clip that the federal judiciary was reshaped on the district level, on the appellate level, and on the Supreme Court level in one term of former President Trump. And let's take a look a little closer at how these federal judges were appointed and their impact that they're going to have. Now, according to the Pew Research Center, one of their fact sheets regarding Trump's appointees is entitled "How Trump Compares with Other Recent Presidents in Appointing Federal Judges." It was published January 13th of 2021. When we start to take a look at the impact that federal judges that Trump had on the federal judiciary by Mitch McConnell's plan, more judges were appointed by two-term presidents than President Trump, former President Trump. According to the Pew Research Center fact sheet, Obama nominated and were appointed 320 to the federal courts. George W. Bush, 322, and Bill Clinton, 367. But he appointed more judges to the federal court in one single term than any other president, 226 in 1 year. I mean, in one term. That's 226. That's a lot of judges. Now, when you break it down, he appointed 174, nominated and appointed 174 to district court and 54 to the appeals court. And we'll talk about the Ninth Circuit in just a moment. And 3 to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, the key to the appellate courts, which were the primary focus of the Mitch McConnell plan, is because most cases die or the final word is heard in the appeals court. And they had to reshape the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit, which encompasses California and the Western states, most Western states. That was the circuit that was knocking down a lot of the conservative presidents, more specifically former President Trump, orders and executive orders and the like. Well, you can't get rid of the Ninth Circuit, but you can reshape it, and that's exactly what they did. They helped to reshape the Ninth Circuit, which now it used to be the most liberal. Now it is trending to be conservative. Now, in like manner, if you take a look at the appellate court judges appointed by Barack Obama in 2 terms, 8 years, he appointed 55. George W. Bush, 62. Bill Clinton, 66. And in 1 term, George H.W. Bush, 42. Again, look at how impactful that 1 term under former President Trump was through the Mitch McConnell plan. Again, generational change. And let's take a look at the influence on the highest court. He appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. All of these, now they're the most by any president since Ronald Reagan, who appointed 4, but that was 4 in 2 terms. And of course, the most by any 1-term president since Herbert Hoover. So all these Supreme Court justices are all 55 years or younger. They're 55 or younger. What does that mean? According to the Pew Research analysis in 2017, it found that who were appointed to the court when they were 55 years or younger ended up serving an average of 2 decades. That's 20 years. That's an average. Some serve less, some serve more. That means these justices will sit on the bench between the age of 70 and 80 years old, if we're looking at averages. 75 years is that average date, that target date. They will be able to rule on 20 cycles of U.S. Supreme Court cases, which will have an indelible, lasting impact for decades after they leave the bench. So you're talking about their influence on those cases will be at a very minimum of a half a century. That's 50 years. Elections have consequences. When we start to take a look at the breakdown of the ethnicity and gender of these judges or justices to the federal judiciary, that women only accounted for 24% of the Trump's judicial appointees. That's a bit higher than its Republican counterparts that served both George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, but below Barack Obama's 42% and Bill Clinton's 28%, according to Pew Research Center. So that tells us that the court itself is more male, appointed under former President Donald Trump. But not just that, but also let's take a look at the ethnicity of these justices and federal judges. He appointed a smaller share of non-white federal judges than recent presidents. About 1 in 6, according to this research study, of judges appointed by Trump, which is 16%, are either Black, Hispanic, Asian, or other race or ethnicity. So you throw everybody else into one pot, it's about 16%. That means 84% of all the justices and federal judges that are appointed by former President Trump under Mitch McConnell's plan, which he gave the list and said, we want these individuals to be nominated. 84% are white males. 84% are white males who are going to serve on these federal benches a minimum of 2 decades, and their impact on the court will be about a half a century, 50 years or more. If you're listening to these numbers, listening to these statistics, you're now seeing the Mitch McConnell plan and how the impact of this particular court can be for decades to come, generations to come. As he said, generational change. Elections have consequences. Those that voted and wanted this conservative court, you got it. Those that did not, this is something that you have to deal with. And you have to ask yourself, what could we have done? And we're going to take a look at that in just a moment, but not now. I want to bring out something else. More than a quarter of currently active federal judges, more than 25%, over 25% of active federal judges are now Trump appointees. In 4 years, former President Donald Trump, under the Mitch McConnell plan, now have the stamp that I was appointed by former President Donald Trump. That is huge. That is huge. So, where do we go from here? What are some of the examples of how the court itself can now start to reshape policy? Because keep in mind that the court itself is a policy-making branch of the government as well. Now, it wasn't set up to be that way. But after the powers of judicial review were established in Marbury versus Madison, a landmark case of the U.S. Supreme Court, which gave them the power to review any federal act, any federal regulation that comes through the government to validate or invalidate it or to change it, whichever way. That makes them policymaking. So that's where you get these politicized labels as being activist judges or justices and strict constructionists and the like. And we're going to look at those two labels in just a moment. But let's take, for example, the landmark civil rights legislation. Now, could that landmark civil rights legislation of the 1960s and 70s, could it be turned and say we don't need it anymore? Many people will say on one side, say, oh, don't worry about it. You know, this is not of our concern. But let's take a look at the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Shelby County versus Holder. Shelby County versus Holder, which was a case that came and rose to the level of the U.S. Supreme Court during the last term of President Obama's two terms as president, basically started to invalidate the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act. Now, we've talked about this in another ClaVille report. Go back and take a look at it where we talked about voting and the impact of voting. But many did not believe that pre-clearance would be taken away. But the moment that conservatives got an opportunity to eliminate it, they did. Not just on the federal level, but also on the state level. Case in point. States that had traditionally discriminated against African Americans with the right to vote during the time of Jim Crow and segregation, through poll taxes, grandfather clauses, guess how many jelly beans in a jelly bean jar, guess how many bubbles in a bar of soap, poll taxes and the like, and outright intimidation and killing of African Americans just trying to vote. The 1965 Voting Rights Act said anytime that you change your laws, your policies, or even redraw your lines of districts, you got to send it to the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division to get it reviewed to make sure that it's not going against federal law and taking away or abridging the rights of African Americans to vote, which traditionally those states had done, before it is approved. Well, that was taken away because it said, well, it was originally created to ensure that African Americans were registering at a high rate and may vote at a high rate or significant rate as their white counterparts, which is true. But what they failed to realize is that that wasn't a provision that everybody agreed upon. That was a provision that had to be in place to protect, because the heartbeat of the people in those states had not changed. But the moment they got a chance to take it away, Shelby versus Holder, they did. And from that moment, when the judges invalidated the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act, states took action almost overnight, where they started now to implement more restrictive voting laws in their states, specifically denying African Americans and others that do not vote Republican or conservative the right to vote. Now, when you say they can still vote, the answer is yes. But the laws became restrictive and made it extremely hard, causing undue burden. As a matter of fact, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is why the Appellate Court is so important, they took a look at the restrictive provisions of North Carolina's law in 2017. And the Supreme Court refused, under Chief Justice Roberts, to hear the case because the Fourth Circuit said that the provisions that restricted, that took away certain polling places, closed down certain hours and the like for counties that were majority African American and areas that are African American to vote. They said it was with surgical precision to deny or discriminate against African American voters, period. That was the reason for the law. Under former Governor Pat McCrory, he tried to appeal it. The Supreme Court said no, the law was invalidated. That's the power of the checks and balances of the Appellate Court, which is why the Mitch McConnell plan was so important to help reshape the federal judiciary, so that those types of laws would now pass and turn back the clock on so many laws and public policies that help to create the atmosphere and give the ability for all Americans, more specifically African Americans, to participate fully, freely, without hurt, harm, or danger in the American process of achieving the American dream: voting, buying homes, employment, investing, and the like. The list goes on and on. We'll talk about a lot of this in future series when we take a look at reparations and what that really means, and the restrictive laws and public policies under critical race theory that denied African Americans and other ethnic minorities and women the ability to participate equitably and fairly in a system. Now, of course, the results, if you put two people in a race, the results are going to be different. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. But can you get in the race? And that's the key, having the ability to get in the race. So when I talk about elections have consequences, the question becomes, what could the other side, the Democrats, could have done to stop this? Again, if you agree with the Mitch McConnell plan, you win. You're winning now. But if you disagree with it, you're losing now. What could have been done? So let's take a look at this clip from Vice Media, which shows us what could have been done, but why the Democrats could not stop it, even during a pandemic.
Senator McConnell and Republicans in the Senate have made no secret of the fact that we consider this a priority.
That priority is confirming conservative judicial nominees, and a lot of them, to federal courts. President Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are fast approaching a new milestone with 193 federal judges confirmed in the last 3 years. Trump's appointed more judges than any president at this point in a term, since the courts were expanded over 40 years ago. You know about the 2 Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed to the bench. The rest have been quietly filling lower court seats. Trump and McConnell have confirmed 138 seats in district courts and 51 seats in the higher appellate courts.
It's important for your listeners to know that most litigation never makes it to the Supreme Court.
He's right. The Supreme Court receives over 7,000 petitions a year. They take about 80. If it rejects a case, the ruling by the lower court stands. Thousands of decisions affecting the daily lives of Americans are being made in courts that are rapidly filling with judges of Donald Trump's choosing. Judicial nominations are so important that McConnell called back the Senate in a pandemic for a judiciary hearing. And Republicans are fine with that.
So I've got no problem with us addressing judicial nominees. That's part of our job. We can do more than one thing at a time. We could walk and chew gum.
But Democrats were not pleased.
We should not be here.
There are 100 issues involving testing and protecting America that we should be considering. Instead, we're taking Senator McConnell's favorite federal judge in Kentucky to give him a promotion today.
Hearing will come to order.
Judge Justin Walker was appointed to the bench on a district court in Kentucky last year. He's clerked for former Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy and his successor, Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Now Walker is Trump's pick for promotion to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, a stepping stone to the Supreme Court. This makes Democrats nervous.
I think your average Democratic voter, may be clear about the risk to Roe versus Wade and access to reproductive health care, but may not see the ways in which this conservative move, both on the Supreme Court and now throughout the federal judiciary, is the beginnings of what would be a dramatic rollback in the ways in which the federal government has been able to act in the best interest of the American people.
Republicans know the impact conservative judges can have on voting rights, immigration, and abortion, and its appeal to the conservative vote.
We're going to process as many conservative judges as we can. We're in charge of that committee, and we're going to use it wisely.
There are less than 6 months until the elections, and McConnell is trying to secure this legacy.
We will leave no vacancy behind. We'll keep confirming these young men and women.
1 in 4 circuit court judges around the country is now a Trump appointee, with an average age of 48. And these are all lifetime appointments. For now, Senate Democrats
are powerless. Now, of course, that was during the pandemic. We've come out of the pandemic. The Trump administration is over. But the McConnell plan to reshape the federal judiciary during the Trump administration is complete. 1 in 4 appellate court justices are Trump appointees. 3 Supreme Court justices, 1/3, are Trump appointees. Overall, 226 is the number of active judges appointed by former President Donald Trump under the Mitch McConnell plan. That brings it to 28% of all active judges are now Trump appointees. And the Democrats were powerless because of process. Mitch McConnell understood process, and he was willing to go against tradition. Not break the law, but go against tradition in holding meetings and hearings and then also the nuclear option of needing 60 votes. All you needed was 50 plus 1. Now, the importance of the 60 vote is that more justices would be not too liberal, not too conservative, not too far right or far left, but they'll be closer to the middle. Because ultimately, when you look at and balance the scales of justice, you want an even balance. You don't want to weigh too far to one side or too far to the other. 60 votes gives you that because you have to come to the table to negotiate and compromise on some issues. But now, because of the legislative branch and the executive branch, some believe that the court has been even more politicized and radicalized from one side to the other. So where do we go from here? Elections have consequences. As we noted, these appointees to all federal courts, district court, which is the trial level, appellate court, intermediate appellate court in the circuits, and the U.S. Supreme Court, all of these are lifetime appointments. They can only be removed if they die in office, they resign, or they retire, or they're impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. Same standard as the president. Other than that, these judges will sit on the bench for over 2 decades on average, some even more. But their decisions will be lasting and last over half a century, over 50 years. This is where I believe advocacy and protest missed the mark. You have to be able to advocate. You have to be able to protest, but you also have to be able to understand a plan and plan for the long term and not react for the short term. But that doesn't mean that advocacy is not useful. It is. It doesn't mean that protest is not useful. It is. But if you add that long-term planning to that, it becomes a powerful force that is unstoppable. I think that's the next step in organizing, the next step in ensuring that the people in democracy have a stronger voice and a more lasting voice when adding the long-term planning to what we believe our nation should be. That's going to come with a change in focus. That's going to come with a change in priorities. That's going to come with a change in understanding that change doesn't come instantly, but lasting change comes over time. It's going to come with some patience as well. So, Justice McConnell, the lasting impact. He took his top priority, understood the process, overstepped tradition, and stayed the course. So long after he leaves the Senate, long after Mitch McConnell leaves this earth, his stamp would be on the federal judiciary during this former Trump's administration. What would be the decisions that are decided? What would be the effect? What would be the intent behind those decisions? Only time will tell. But we do know from history and understanding when the courts have been turned or stacked in the opposite direction, we do know what will take place. So we have to remain vigilant, informed, and ensure that we are active in the process. on a continuous basis. That's the only way, as a people, as a nation, we can truly understand how our country and each branch of government can work for all people. Thank you again for joining us for this segment of the ClaVille Report, where we examine Justice McConnell, the lasting impact on the federal judiciary. Like us and share us on our social media, the ClaVille Report on Facebook, and comment, let us know your thoughts. Until next time, we'll see you again. Thank you.